The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
you're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, June 23rd, 2016. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Obviously, I'm not Ben. I'm Anoa, way with Anoa. Shout out to the Dixon clan. There is a momentous occasion occurring this evening. Somebody's having a graduation. You know, rock on, little dude. Keep up all the excellence that your mom and dad has put before you and, you know, make us all proud here at Progressive Army. Ben had a family engagement tonight. He did give a shout out to his son on Twitter about it. So, you know, I'm here filling in. We had a pretty wicked news day. I mean, like, if it happened, if anything had happened, it seemed like it was happening today. You know what I'm saying? Like, so much is going on today. You know, Bernie Sanders had a live stream event, town hall this evening. He's stumping on the campaign trail for New York candidates. Shout out to Zephyr Teachout running in the New York primary. There's several other New York candidates that are running that support Senator Sanders. You can look on Sanders Democrats, or you can look on the Bernie Kratz website to find out a little bit more about who else is running in New York. Speaking of New York, this is something that my daughter and I saw, I think either today or yesterday. Thought it was pretty interesting. New York has passed a new law. New York City has passed a new law for menstrual equity. What does that mean? Well, schools, prisons, community centers, hospitals, they will make available sanitary napkins, pads, tampons. They'll make those free and available, accessible to those who need them. I know some of you are like, wait, why are you talking about it? It's a big deal. It's a big deal, and it is really something that can be a difficult challenge for those who may need some sort of economic assistance. I mean, it's already a challenge, you know, day to day anyway, but the burden of having to pay for such goods and services, well, not services, but such goods, you know, during that time of the monthly flow, it can be cumbersome for folks. So it's pretty cool, actually, that the city of New York is doing this. Like I said, New York primaries next Tuesday. So definitely, you know, if you're in New York, if you're not in New York, give a shout out to somebody, you know, hop on the dialer. The Bernie dialer is up. You can phone bank for New York candidates. So yeah, so there's like I said, there's a lot that popped off today. Going to talk a little about some world politics week, because we had, well, before that, I forgot. There's an oil spill today in California. I believe it's just a little shy of 30,000 gallons of oil spilled. Let me see, I have it right here. 30,000 gallons of oil spilled. What did I do with it? I just had it up. Oh, well, okay. So, but 30,000 gallons of oil spilled, and it was, it went into a big ravine, like a grassy area. So they're working on cleanup and mitigation now. But I mean, I think it was originally estimated like 200,000 gallons, and it's closer to like 29,000, 30,000 gallons. That's still a lot of oil. And these are kind of the issues when we look at like issues with containment and water sources and stuff like that. Like, these are things that we need to be concerned about, like how companies are handling materials of this fashion when you know, everyone's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal until something like this happens, right? And then we have an issue, even if it's in an area that may not be immediately inhabited, or if it's not an immediate drinking source, there's still always the potential. And so we need to make sure that we're having conversations. I mean, this is more of the reason why we need to be paying attention to the way companies handle goods and services. And just makes me think of like the train explosion that happened last year. We've had some pipeline leaks and bursts and stuff, but trains are dangerous too. So we really need to just make sure that the regulations in these areas are tight. I'm not really exactly, because I can't find my articles. I have my little notes on the side. But the California oil spill that just happened today, that's nothing to just shrug it like, it's a big deal. It may not be as big as like, the oil spill they had in the Gulf, but it's oil spills are important to pay attention to. So next, I want to talk about a little world news, right? Because we were asked last night about what we talk about what's going on in Oaxaca. If you don't know, teachers in Oaxaca have been on strike. I think it's been going on maybe a little more than I think it's been a year in total that all of this has been going on. But more recently, there have been clashes between teachers and the police. There have been clashes with teachers and the police. And there was a protest in New York either today or yesterday in front of the Mexican consulate, just basically the conditions, the treatment of teachers and their families and other, protesters. There were some really violent clashes over this past weekend with tear gassing and other things happening. So when we look at, we talk about movements for social justice and we talk about issues going on. There's a lot that's going on internationally and what's happening with the teachers. I want to say that this might, when you had the student teachers last year that went missing. This is connected. We need to be aware of what is happening outside of our little, Bernie progressive American bubble, because there's a lot that happens in terms of our so-called partners, right? In our neighboring countries, there's a lot that's going on that we can have an influence and help support causes elsewhere. And it helps build a broader alliance, so to speak, for many of these issues and treatment and conditions. But I'm trying to pull up my notes because I got stuck in traffic. Got back here a little bit later than I anticipated. So forgive me. Really appreciate you guys for hanging in there. But yeah, so this is when we talk about radicalization and characterizing people who are other than us as enemies, because that's how we have teachers who are trying to organize for better conditions, and they're being treated as, enemies of the state almost, so to speak. They are, they're trying to make sure, children, regardless of wealth or background, have the same right and access to education. They are challenged, though. These teachers who decide to stand up and demand, equality in education, something that we allegedly have here, right? They're considered radical and revolutionary, and that's being treated as a bad thing. That's being met with state-sanctioned violence and repression. So as of late, there's been more violence on behalf of police officers toward the teachers and supporters. And like I said, there was a protest in New York outside the Mexican consulate. But so there have been power shutoffs in Oaxaca and curfews enacted, and people. It's been pretty rough. And these are people who are standing up for just what they believe to be right, just, and true. So, while it's not the same thing, we're so quick to label people as reactionary or rebellious or whatever the case may be. When we look at the basic human rights and needs involved, a lot of what's happening in several countries, including our own, is really the repression of social justice work, of equality, and of helping people move along to where they need to be able to be productive members of their communities. So that's just my little tidbit. We can go into a more in-depth conversation on Twitter about it, or we can chat in the Progressive Army group on Facebook if you guys want to talk about this issue in particular some more. But the other thing that's been happening internationally is there have been, I think this year, if Q sent me some stuff, this has been like a record year for murder of environmental activists abroad. There have been 3 killed a week, with 185 killings since 2015. Why is this important? Well, as we look at, environmental degradation in many countries, particularly when we look at South America and in Brazil and the rainforest and Costa Rica and Honduras and other places, right? When we look at what people are doing and the work they're trying to do in preserving their natural environment and working against multinational corporations, and how a lot of times these corporations are maybe working with if not dictatorship, but repressive governments, right? So our comforts here in the United States, here in quote unquote first world countries, at times are maintained and supported by the oppression, and degradation of other people elsewhere. And these are things that we need to be conscientious of as we have these lofty, idealistic academic conversations about equality and justice as we sit around in our living rooms with our 46-inch screen televisions, while people in other places are literally fighting for life and death. There are all these other considerations. So it's like, I know you're making the list longer and longer of things that we have to care about. No, I just think if you have a humanist worldview, if you think about people and what is important to life, you find the capacity to care about more than just, what affects us directly. So the other thing that is happening internationally today are the exit. We have the Brits trying to decide if they're going to leave the EU or stay with the crew. And last I saw today, unless something changed, was that the results are starting to come in. Exit polls showed that it was being narrowly defeated. The referendum was narrowly defeated from exit polls. We'll see. I think the results are starting to come in now. Of the referendum results, but this is a week to the day of the murder of the British Prime Minister Jo Cox. So, and she was a proponent of staying in the EU. She was a vocal advocate for staying with the EU. So it'll be interesting to see how. If even in her memory, right, Britain kind of just stays in the fold. This is only the third national referendum, I believe, from what I read earlier in the country's history. The Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, said, "I have been campaigning for a Remain vote in the European Union because I think we have to work with like-minded people across Europe who want to deal with tax havens and tax avoidance, who want a continent that does protect its environment and encourage others to protect its environment, but also one that's in solidarity with people rather than seeing them as enemies." This leaving the EU vote has also been seen as a kind of attempt to promote, right-wing anti-immigrant political policies as well. So, I think that, being a part of that greater mixture, I'm not going to pretend to be a policy expert, but this is really something that's really interesting going on in the news. Britain is one of the stronger countries in the EU, and for Britain to leave, I think that that makes things very difficult for those countries that do remain in the EU. And I think there's a lot of benefit, but there seems to be some benefits and some purpose for Britain to stay in as well. So we'll see what happens. We'll be checking. It's kind of interesting to be looking at someone else's results. I'm sorry. I did not mean to say prime minister. I flipped the letters. MP. I read MP backwards. It's a member of parliament, which is MP, not prime minister. I said prime minister. Jo Cox was not the prime minister. She was a member of parliament. Just flipping the letters, trying to get the British get their acronyms right. My bad. But it'd be really interesting to see how the rest of the referendum is so wild because it's a weeknight. I'm usually covering U.S. politics and news, and now tonight I'm looking at British politics and news. It's kind of a weird twist of things. But there is, like I said, there's a lot going on. So I know I'm only giving little snippets because so much is happening today. And I didn't want to just pick three things and not mention these other things over here. So the other thing that happened, going back to, the Southern Hemisphere, Colombia hit the news today with the Colombian government and the FARC guerrillas declared a ceasefire agreement after 50 years. That's pretty wild. And it still requires approval and referendum, but this is a key step towards a resolution of this long conflict. So that's like something that when you've had conflict for 50 years to find even the steps of resolution. It'll be interesting to see what that looks like going forward, and how that plays out. So it's definitely something for all of us to keep an eye on. Again, I mean, some of you may not really care about international news, but global politics really does actually matter for the way we engage and do things, even in our own little worlds, in our own backyard, in our own communities. So that's just my little world politics roundup right there. Just a little snippet of things going on. We'll definitely drop more links and stuff, everything, all the articles and stuff from tonight. Definitely we'll tweet them out, whatever, so you guys can dig a little bit deeper. If you want to have a more in-depth conversation, hit me up on Twitter. We can chop it a little bit, or come join us on Facebook. We have a Progressive Army, Facebook group. It's open to everybody who wants to join. Come join us in there. We can continue the conversation. So next little subject we're going to go into our Supreme Court roundup. Supreme Court's been really busy this week. I had my little rundown, but you know what I'm saying? We just gonna kick it up with Becky with the bad grades. Stay mad, Abby. Becky with the bad grades. Yes. And the case in what's the name? Abby, whatever that child's name is. The affirmative action case that was before the Supreme Court. This is basically her second crack. I mean, people who are on death row don't even get to get their appeals always heard at the Supreme Court. And this mediocre child has had her case heard not once, but twice. And she's been denied not once, but twice. Hopefully now she goes and sits down some damn where and stops whining about, them few little minorities that might have got in over her. This is a very interesting case. It's a very interesting case for the simple fact. I mean, it's rather stupid. Like, I don't know how many of you remember when Bowling Greta came down in 2002, when I was still an undergrad then. It really changed the way people perceived, affirmative action processes in education, and rightfully or wrongfully so. The cases came down, and in schools, they didn't necessarily have the same, like they used to have, like some schools just have like real specific point values for stuff, right? And now, things are taken in consideration, things are weighted. It's a little bit more fluid the way things are. And now a larger category of things count as diversity and contribution than just looking at just strictly at race or ethnicity, as maybe it was in the past. What's also really interesting about this young white woman, right, who's upset because she didn't get into the school of her choice. There's actually several different things. One, white women are actually the largest beneficiaries from affirmative action programs in American history. Affirmative action programs were created to help, and ameliorate certain injustices and level the playing field predominantly for racial minorities. I mean, that's pretty much the reason in creation. However, when you look at the statistics, when you look at the actual programs and stuff, white women have actually benefited more than other groups. So that's one thing that's really interesting about her in this case, attacking affirmative action. Two, what's really interesting is when you look at the actual facts of this case, like the argument that took place, Scalia has not passed away, but he said some real inflammatory stuff, and everyone's like, oh my God, Scalia's been saying crazy, inflammatory, racist stuff for decades now, right? But anyway, like with this case, what was really interesting, the allegation that somehow she was perfect, and I can't remember exactly what her scores were, but I remember I had higher scores back in the 90s when I was going to college. But she was perfect. She had like a 3-something GPA. She had like an 11 or 12. I think she had like 1160 SAT score. It was above average, but it wasn't like she was like really balling out of control. It's not like this kid had like a 1500 and got denied, right? So anyway, the argument goes, this is what always goes, those colored people over there are not as good as me, and they got in. But see, here's the problem with Abby's argument. There were way more people of color who were denied, who actually had better scores than she did, better grades than she did. They got denied. And there were also white people who got in over her who had quote unquote lesser grades and test scores. But again, they look at a whole range of values and issues and stuff like that when deciding who to submit to school. They do a full file review. And so this was her second crack or whatever. And I just couldn't, because of the way that is, and because of just the facts of this case, I could not understand why this went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Not once, but twice. She wasn't in the top 10% of her class, which would have given her automatic admission. She was offered the opportunity to go to one of the other campuses in the UT system and then to transfer over after her first year. She had a certain GPA. They gave her options. It wasn't like she was completely shut out, as my kids would, for no random reason, right? No, but it's like this white mediocrity syndrome. And no diss to anyone out there, because it's not, I'm not trying to say that all white people like are a certain way or whatever, but there are certain people who have a certain mentality that think they're just entitled to stuff and they should just exist and just have it because they want it. And it's like, sweetheart, that is not life. So Becky with the bad grades, I'm so happy the Supreme Court shot you down today. And even though it's a rather narrow ruling, it does leave in place the system that exists at UT. I have a shout out to my girl, Yasmin Irizarry, professor in the African American Studies Department. She's at UT. They're trying to build a community and foster an environment that is preparing people for the real world, and preparing people for engaging and interacting with others. And so I'm actually kind of glad she didn't get into UT, because they have a really brand of excellence, and clearly your crybaby stuff don't stand up to that too much. So yeah, I know that wasn't really like the legal analysis everyone was expecting, but I can't even be like legit legal, technical, academic with this one. Becky with the bad grades. Really happy you and your racist lawyer got shot down. Yeah, stay mad, Abby. Becky with the bad grades. Beyonce had Becky with the good hair. We got Becky with the bad grades. So, but no, seriously, like when we talk about systemic inequality, we talk about systemic racism and generations of disinvestment, underinvestment, and lack of opportunity. And then to get to the collegiate level and pretend like that does not matter in the process for people. Not saying that it is an excuse, not saying that it should, trump other accomplishments. But when you're looking at your classes in a makeup, if you got 50 people with okay grades and okay SAT scores and they all play the cello, what do you need one more of those for? Do you have the young person that has worked their way through high school, has okay grades, has okay test scores, also has all these other extracurricular activities, volunteers, things like that? That's somebody that's going to add a little bit more, regardless of whether they're Black, light, white, Latino, Asian, don't matter. That's somebody that's going to add a little bit more to the environment of your campus. You don't need 50 people like Becky with the bad grades at your school. 49 is good enough. Then you start letting in some more people who kind of round things out. And that's what it seems like the UT process and other schools that have that process. Like I went to the Ohio State University, I gotta say the, and I helped with admissions stuff when I was in minority engineering. And the scholarship, Office of Minority Affairs, I forget what they changed their name to, but the scholarship criteria changed after the 2002 case. And they looked at a wider diversity. The schools will take into consideration, sexual orientation, what I'm saying now. Like schools will take different things because it's acknowledging that there are parts of our experience that make up who we are and help us contribute to the environment around us. And that is actually something that's really valuable. We could talk about diversity and whether or not, conversations about diversity are overrated, but there's also something to really be said that when you're sitting in a classroom with people who have different opinions and experiences with you, you learn so much more about the world and how things work than if you're sitting in a classroom with 50 people who are just like you, who went to schools just like yours, who come from homes just like yours. You don't learn anything. All it reinforces is what you think the world is. It doesn't give you a good representation of what the world ought to be or really actually is in reality. So yeah. Girl, bye. Bye, Felicia. On the flip side, SCOTUS, yeah. On the flip side, there was a appeal of an appellate court had struck down, had blocked some sections of, sweeping immigration reforms that President Obama had implemented. And the Supreme Court this is the problem now. We've had a tied court now. 4-4, and this is what happens. We have the appellate court decision stands. That is the decision that ends up in that case. Now, it's not to say that in another district, another jurisdiction, someone else could not also bring a suit to challenge, but it becomes very difficult when we're talking about the federal government how to defend executive order from the president. It becomes very difficult now, though, in this instance, because it's not like it's just a private party, a private citizen bringing a suit, and some other private person can bring a suit someplace else. So what steps the DOJ will have to take, to get, if they can get around this, they may be able to have another crack. I don't know. But now I believe it goes back down to the appellate court. So it goes back down to appellate court with instructions. So we'll see what happens when it goes back to them upon remand. I mean, this is why we need a full court, because we don't necessarily get good law this way. We get a very patchwork, malarkey. And like I told you guys the other night, be on the lookout for the Texas abortion case, because that's potentially a case where either we end up with a deadlock, which leaves an atrocious situation in place in Texas, or we end up with potentially with not enough votes to overturn the lower court in that situation. So, I mean, this is the reason why we need people who are not just, appointments to pacify the right, because as we see with, I believe it was Breyer, in the Fourth Amendment case that just happened, who sided with the more conservative judges on the bench. And he's supposed to be a more progressive, more liberal appointee. So, yeah, so this is what we need to not have, SCOTUS nominees who are, consolation prizes for the right service, because there are some really serious issues that we need addressed. And we need people who are going to be willing to stand up for us as a whole, and not just to keep intact systems of prejudices and limitations and restrictions unnecessarily. So SCOTUS was all over the place. So comment from the chat. The SAT scores are racist. It gives higher scores to wealthier white males. Tons of work done on it. It was originally designed to keep commoners out of elite colleges. Yeah, that's true. There is a lot of study out there about SAT scores, although despite how racist there are still some of us who do exceptionally well on tests. But overall, there is a lot of information out there. Same thing with LSAT scores. Pretty much all standardized testing has a racial bias inherent in it. There are some schools that are moving away from using SAT scores and other scores. But that's why being able to look at a full package of an applicant and not just the test scores is really so important, because it's one thing, like the comment says, it's one thing we can acknowledge that there's racial biases. We can acknowledge that there's systemic, disinvestment, systemic racism. I mean, because really actually the use of SAT, that would be another example of systemic racism in higher education. However, even with the difference of people being able to have access to prep courses, right? I mean, that's going to be an economic disparity. If your parents can afford to pay for private tutors and things like that for you to do really well and keep retaking the test, that's a big difference from the kid that may or may not even have the $35 for the Kaplan book from the bookstore, let alone if you even have a bookstore anywhere near your community. So like I said, I've done a lot of academic advisement with primarily minority engineering students was more so my focus when I was an undergrad. But so we saw, I saw kids who did really well, but I saw kids who also struggled. But at the end of the day, they all did well in school because of their hard work ethic and their ability to utilize resources available in the university setting. So, looking at people as a well-rounded profile, that's one thing that they talked about when I went to the West Virginia University for law school. That's one thing they talked about in our admissions process as well, is looking at doing the full file review of students. And I think that's a good way to go, because you really get a better, well-rounded, viewpoint. Now, the elite schools will do whatever they're going to do. It is what it is. But for all the rest of schools, I really think that this approach to looking at, adding to the student body is a good way to go. So kudos to SCOTUS on Becky with the bad grades. Y'all let us down with the immigration. Up, just you dropped the ball. I mean, 4-4. No one that recalcitrance, it just does not help us at all. So moving along, because like I said, so a lot happened, and I would actually like to get a couple of y'all on the phone today, because I know I end up talking or I have a guest, and I'm rarely ever able to take calls, but I'm getting there. So I'm trying to wrap it up so I can get to you all, because I want to hear what some of you got to say out there. Definitely, hop on the line and call in. So the third of the police cases in the Freddy Gray saga came to an end today. The judge issued a ruling. This was another bench trial. So we've had one jury trial, which ended in a hung jury. And we had two bench trials. The last one was an acquittal, and this one is also an acquittal. This case, Goodman is Caesar Goodman is the officer, and he was the one that drove the van. He's the one that's accused of doing the rough ride, and this was thought to be the one that had the strongest evidence for conviction. So there's a lot going on out there, just from looking at just responses on Twitter and stuff. Some people are really mad at prosecutor Mosby and her team for the way they seemingly botched these cases. I don't know that I would say that. I think that there are a lot of challenges in prosecuting police cases. So one of the things that stuck out, if I have it here, I thought I copied it down from the judge, what he said earlier. I had copied it down just to be able to read. So basically, it's the same. It's basically a similar rationalization as the last case. There's an element to the argument that, to meet the burden, prosecutors have the burden. Prosecutors have to meet the burden. There was no jury before which, in this case, to appeal to their motion. This is another bench trial, as I mentioned before. Defendants can opt for a bench trial, and I think that Maryland is one of the places where the prosecution does not have the right to object. I could have that backwards, but the one thing, Judge Williams, who was a former city prosecutor himself, and he also investigated police misconduct for the Justice Department, he said that there were 5 equally plausible scenarios for which when Gray could have injured himself. And it actually may not have been clear to Officer Goodson, that Gray was injured at any particular point. I really do feel like judges give police officers way too much leeway in terms of their activity, right? So we have this reluctance within the judicial system to see cops as anything other than doing their job. And it makes it very difficult to make a case for situations that are clearly more than just common error mistake that rise to the level of negligence, criminally in this case, malfeasance, things that should actually warrant criminal charges. Now, the police union is saying that this is malicious prosecution, all that other stuff. But what Judge Williams has said, he cited the testimony of the prosecution's medical witness and said that the injuries were progressive and that it's possible that Gray had talked at various points in time along transport, suggesting that it wouldn't have been clear that he was injured. And he also, because all of this turns on whether or not there was a rough ride. And he says that the rough ride is something that's very inflammatory and evokes a lot of, emotion. And this is not something to just throw around lightly, and that just the prosecution just did not prove. Because again, the prosecution has a very high burden in a criminal case, and just the prosecution did not prove that that's what happened. But we do know that rough rides are a common practice in Baltimore. I mean, there's studies, there's information. Y'all check out, if you don't already follow Liz Brown, Lizz Brown, on Twitter. She's an attorney. She's awesome. She does really great political analysis, way better than I do. She really breaks it down. And one of the things that she says that we need to keep doing is we need to keep supporting prosecutors who are willing to step out there and bring charges, bring cases against cops, right? Like, if we continue to support people and help them feel comfortable in doing so, they will continue to do so, and they will continue to do, a good job of bringing, the best the most vigorous prosecution possible. And I found that was a really interesting statement, because we do see so often prosecutors are reluctant to do so, right? They because I mean, it's like having to go up against your friends, your coworkers. I mean, in some instances, which is why a lot of people, argue for special prosecutors in cases because of how closely prosecutors and police work with each other. There's also something from her timeline that she broke down that suggested, and there's a gag order, so you're not going to hear anything from the prosecutor's office because there is a gag order in place. There was something about how the police department actually had been working with the defense, providing them with notes and other stuff or whatever, which, if true, is so uncanny, right? Of course, they're only doing it because the other defendants are police officers. Like, when does that ever happen? You never see police officers helping to get people off for crimes committed, right? Because like, isn't it part of their job to make sure people are punished for the crimes they commit? Unless it's part of the crew, and then everybody. But the other thing, which gets to the other thing that Liz said today, Liz said that we really need to break through the blue wall of silence, right? That blue code of silence, because this need to protect each other from accountability and from justified prosecutions, which people can argue whether or not this is justified or not, but somebody who should not have been arrested, was manhandled, was not buckled in, was, whether it was intentional or not, was driven around very roughly, was incapacitated, hospitalized, and died. So we need to get out of the family, was able to recover civilly against the city of Baltimore, but that doesn't do anything. There are civil suits every year in America against police departments all over the country. There are millions and millions of dollars have been paid out for the last decade, at least, if not more, from civil suits against police departments. That clearly is not a deterrent for bad police behavior. We need the laws exist to prosecute police officers. We need people who are willing to do it. And from what I've seen, Prosecutor Mosby, she does seem willing to prosecute these cases. Now, whether or not she needs to because it's the same, I believe it's the same judge. So whether or not she needs to kind of like tighten up or try and figure out another theory of the case, or what she needs to do ahead of the next trial next month, she definitely needs to do that. There was a statement today from the NAACP in Baltimore and the Gray family. The Gray's family, they're very frustrated with the process, but they do support Mosby. You know what I'm saying? The family's attorney, William Murphy, said that Prosecutor Mosby is one of the most courageous prosecutors in the country, and she is fighting for a just cause. You know what I'm saying? So they're still like in there with her. So and for what I saw earlier today, I haven't checked this evening, but what I saw earlier today, people are not happy with the verdict, of course not, but they're taking it in stride the way they need to. And now that he has been found not guilty, Goodson is eligible for back pay, and he's in reinstatement of his pay and back pay. He is still on suspension though, and will face administrative review. And the proceedings are not going to be made public from his administrative process. But I think that we need to have a serious conversation about how police officer conduct is viewed within the judicial system, about standards of reasonableness. And I've said this before, instead of looking at traditional notions, constitutional notions, we've already seen, like I said, the Supreme Court has been expanding what is reasonable, what is acceptable police behavior, and further eroding our civil liberties and rights. They've been doing it for a very long time, and it just continues. Like cops are given more and more leeway, and now y'all have promoted and pushed for body cameras, so they can take you doing anything and everything if they're just walking around. You know what I'm saying? So we need to have a conversation about cops, about how they engage with people. And I understand that they have a job to do. I understand that there's work to be done. I understand, but again, this is one of many cases where there was someone who should not have been detained. You know what I'm saying? Who there was no reason for what ultimately happened to them. None whatsoever. And yet we're sitting here saying, there's no evidence either way that anyone knew or should have known that this could have happened. I mean, if as a parent, if I don't buckle my kid in, right, or if I'm taking care of an elderly person or someone who's mentally incapacitated somehow, and I don't buckle them in when they're in my care, I can be held criminally liable for that. If I don't buckle my kid in, I can be held liable for criminal negligence, because I should have known that not buckling in my child would cause them to be hurt. So when police officers take you in custody, they're responsible for your care and well-being. And when they do things knowingly, right, and antagonistically, that should rise to criminal negligence. It seems like there's a different standard for what's criminally negligent when you talk about police officers and when you talk about the average person. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all people who have our own, issues. They just carry a badge and a gun. So the other thing going on, there's also a community development issue going on in Baltimore. And I've just been following some stuff on Twitter. Be More Doc, had some stuff in his timeline about a community development process where they're really trying not to let the community know what's going on. but it has all this money in it from a developer, and it's being like pushed by the city planning. They're like, oh, it's just a plan, it's not really that big of a deal. Yeah, okay, we know what it is when you guys want to put a lot of money into something and you're not trying to have community input and voice on an issue. That's a problem. So okay, so Remain is still in the lead on the Brexit, right? I think it's hashtag Brexit. I don't know. But yeah, so Remain in the EU is still in the lead. Hopefully, I think the EU was a really big deal, and it's wild to already, to see people trying to leave already. So yeah, that's going on. But speaking of stuff, updates and stuff. Yesterday we had a conversation about the Democratic sit-in at the House. The no bill, no break. Well, apparently today the sit-in ended after 25 hours and they all went on break. And there was a commitment. To doing something when we came back. And we had this conversation last night about, is it good to do something? Is it good that they're just trying to do something? Should we, does it matter what they're trying to do? Like, is it really that big of a deal? And my answer was yes. And, I was very critical and harsh about it, whatever. But I got to give a shout out to my sis, Goddess Pamela. She was on the show with me last week. She pushed back against us a little bit. She goes, isn't it good though? At least look at this strong showing of effort. And, I'm still kind of like, But one thing, someone else pointed out on Twitter is that they were asking for people to submit their testimony about gun violence to your representatives and your senators. And that I actually think is a very strong piece, right? I really do think that people who have experienced or who have thoughts or who have, live in communities where these are issues, I really do think that you should take the time to write your congressman, to write your congressperson, to write your senator, to let people write your state folks too, and let them know kind of about gun violence and about how that has affected you and what you think about it, whatever, and that you want them to do. But let's not just say we want them to do something. Let's figure out what are some things that we want them to do. Because again, I was really disappointed by tweets I saw from Feinstein yesterday when she's talking about keeping Americans safe from foreign nationals. The hell are you talking about? Omar was born in New York. He wasn't a foreign national. See, this is what I'm talking about. Like, so that's where I got caught up at. Like I couldn't get past, this supposedly brave incident, this showing of bravery and power, right, of Dems, when they could have shown bravery and power when they actually had the majority some years ago. But when we use this coded language, when we use these fear tactics and this fear mongering to try to move along something that really won't even put a dent, but they're doing something. And that's what we can't get. If they're willing to, they're acting like they're willing to step out there, right? And they're trying to force this conversation and they're claiming this is a broader conversation, then let's make them accept the challenge. Let's accept the challenge. They're saying they're going to do something. Let's be specific. Tell them specifically what you want them to do. It don't matter if you decide to leave the party and go green. It don't matter if you pushing for a brand new Congress in 2018. We have the people that we have right now, and they are still accountable to us because they represent us, and we need to flood them and make sure they listen. Because if they want to do something, all these grand gestures, okay, I got something for you to do. I got a whole long list of things we do. And I don't care that the Republicans will only meet us in this place. If you that about it and you that ready to defy what other people are saying, then you should be ready to go the distance on these issues. Because if you want to start campaigning on this stuff, because that's just look at it, right? They did this and now they're on break until after the 4th of July holiday. And then basically when we get back, it's going to be general election time, campaign season, right? I mean, look at that. Like this is a perfect commercial stuff. People are going to go back to their districts and talk about this. When they come back home to their districts, challenge them to do something, but list what that something should be. And it needs to be way more They're trying to use that terror watch list that is hugely flawed. We've all been posting several different articles and stuff about it, about why that is so problematic. Do something, but do something. Go big or go home. Like, seriously. You can still go green. More power to you. You can vote them out in brand new Congress 2018. Do whatever you got to do. But we still have these people right now who are grandstanding and saying they're trying to do something. They claim they want to keep us safe. Let's put that challenge to the test. It's not going to take you much but to write up a little email or send a little note, write a postcard. I got some postcards. If you local, I can give you some postcards. I mean, push the conversation, force them to. So I just thought that was really interesting. And Sean King, actually, I credit Pamela and Sean King. Sean King had a piece earlier today where he basically said that, it was this great showing, and he also lives here in Atlanta in John Lewis's district, and, I respect him, and he's this great person, whatever. And then he talked about the issues that we've already laid out with the law and why it was problematic. But the fact that they were willing to take this stand, okay, you're willing to make the stand, well, let's make it count, right? You want to use your voice? Well, these are the ways. Come up with 3 to 5 things they could do. What are 2 things they could do? The universal background check provision, like we talked about before, that actually makes sense. But so often we use these statistics, and it takes the argument out of context. We talk about this one very minor area. I think it's only a couple of hundred deaths are due to rifles a year compared to the thousands due to handguns. And I'm not trying to belittle or minimize death at all, because it's very serious and very real. But if we're going to use statistics, if we're going to use data, we're manipulating it for maximum emotional capacity, I'm going to call you out. And I'm not going to be nice about it. So challenge them. Don't just say, yes, oh my God, that's so great. They're doing something. Hitler did something. Jim Crow was something. Just because people are doing something doesn't always mean it's a good thing, right? So definitely want to hear what you guys got to say, because we're going to go over for a little bit because I was a little late. I do apologize. Atlanta traffic, man, it sucks. Like, you should be able to go like 5 minutes without having to sit in traffic for an hour. Like, seriously, it's so bad. Anyway, you guys hop on and talk to us. Number is 857-600-0518. Is that right? I think I got that right. I think I finally memorized the number. Call. Let me know what's going on. I want to hear from you guys. I mean, like I said, a lot happened today. I have a whole list of stuff, and I'm just trying, but I really do want to hear and see what you guys have to say. I can keep talking because y'all know me. I can talk. I mean, I can just keep going. There was a Muslim officer fired by I guess he was suspended by the NYPD. He was not able to get a religious waiver or variance or whatever for his beard, and he was refusing to shave it in observance of his faith, and they were claiming it was against his dress code. So that's just something else that happened in New York today. I mean, it's a lot going on. Like I said, the dim sitting is over. Oh yeah, there's a piece in Mother Jones about my 4 months as a private prison guard. Which is kind of graphic and kind of, I mean, it definitely reinforces everything that we've already been talking about when we talk about private prisons and why they need to go. Q said his hair and beard were wicked too. Yeah. Yeah, so call 857-600-05. I think that's right, 0518. We got phones. I have phones. I can talk to you. We can hear what's going on. Like I said, it's a lot that happened today. Would like to hear, what you guys think about what's going on in the world. Something else, I kind of dibble and dabble into my little pop culture. Yep, I had it right. 857-600-0518. Call, hop on the line. Let me hear your voice. We're going to go for about another 15 minutes since I came on a little late. But nothing that kind of bugged me a little bit. There was a op-ed I saw from Afropunk. Zoe Saldana, I guess, coming up. I can't remember if it's Elle magazine. It's one of the little fashion magazines, whatever. She did another interview and kind of trying to basically defend her horrible Nina Simone role. And she made some comment about, had she not made this movie, had we not had this conversation, how many people would really know about Nina Simone? You know, Zoe, I loved you in Colombiana. You're pretty cool as a hura. But yeah, you need to just shut your damn mouth about the whole Nina Simone thing. Like, seriously. She made some comment about basically if people had problems with her nose prosthesis, then what does that say about their standards of beauty? The fact that you had to wear a nose prosthesis is, and that you don't understand why people had a problem with it. So for those who aren't familiar, the whole debacle was, you know, Zoe Saldana played Nina Simone in a movie that apparently tanked. And to do so, you know, she had to darken her skin, and there was this whole thing.
Hello?
Hello? Hi, I have a caller. Caller, you're on the air.
Hi,
What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Jamie from Progressive Army.
Hello?
Pixie on the moon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I hear you. Hey, Jamie.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I was just calling in tonight to, talk about that, what that you were talking about, basically the Fourth Amendment thing.
Okay, go on.
And the terrorist watch list.
Okay.
Well, that's kind of problematic for people with mental illness.
Right.
I mean,
and I remember you had
yeah.
posted something earlier today about at least one incident.
What's that?
I said, and I saw either you or maybe Q, one of you two posted something earlier about the FBI going after people, intentionally going after people with mental illness and trying to set them up to do terrorist activity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was just kind of calling to kind of highlight a little bit.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I know you were doing some, and for those who don't know, Jamie is a pretty awesome researcher and writer here for Progressive Army. So I know you've been actually digging in kind of and doing some research stuff around this. So where's kind of your take? Because you gave me some stuff to read, but I know you've just been digging in way more than I have. So what is kind of your take, like, on how these three things, I guess, even though it seems like the Fourth Amendment, and I did say this to someone the other day, the Fourth Amendment ruling in terms of, you know, widening what is a reasonable search, widening the scope of searches and seizures, is a little different from, you know, the deprivation of the terror with the terrorist watch list. They do both have, you know, interplays with people, in particular when people have mental illnesses. So kind of from what you've been researching and reading and stuff, what's kind of your take on these two issues?
Yeah, well, it's kind of there's a history of, you know, people with mental illness being targeted for, you know, certain activities.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the history, but I've never experienced it in my life.
Right.
I've actually been pretty lucky. And
okay.
I know people, you know, who have, I don't know people who have experienced, I don't think being on the terrorist watch list or anything, but I do know people that have been adversely affected by just the stigma, really.
Right.
That, I've even seen it in some progressive pages.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not that they're trying to, and I understand sometimes it's a expression of frustration, but it's like, ouch, guys. But it, you know, that's one of the reasons I really enjoy the Progressive Army, because you guys have always been very sensitive to, you know, issues on mental illness, and I really appreciate you guys for that.
Well, I appreciate that you are a voice in the group that also definitely brings it up and highlights it, and our need to conceptualize it in a different light. You know, I think especially when you don't have experience or exposure in any context, you know, sometimes it can be a very academic conversation without any real nuance. And I really do appreciate that you've called in one tonight. And then two, that you do.
Thanks, Anoa. I know I kind of sprung this on you, but it was a spur of the moment thing for me.
No, you're good. I'm really glad you called in. Thank you so much. And we definitely need to finish talking.
Thank you.
Y'all need to check. Wait, because Jamie has a piece that's going to be coming out soon, or a couple pieces is coming out soon. So you're definitely going to have to look for those. Oh no, you're fine. So I'm just going through because I just hopped on my Twitter real quick. Because Liz, I told y'all, go to Liz. You got to follow Liz Brown because Liz does her Liz Unpacks. She does it weekly pretty much because there's always something going on. But she's been going all day pretty much about the Goodson verdict. You know, this is now the third case with the Freddy Gray, not to circle back a little bit. But she just said, like, you know, she quotes Angelique Herbert, the neck of Freddy Gray felt like a crumbly bag of rocks. And then, you know, ultimately, of course, this is sarcasm. The judge decided that this was just simple carelessness. And simple carelessness is not, you know, does not rise to the level of criminal, you know, negligence or responsibility, accountability. The fact that this is characterized as just a simply careless. Oh, okay, another caller. Caller, you're on the air. What is your name and where are you from?
Oh, hey, Anoa, this is Q.
Hi.
Hello?
Hello? I'm here. I hear you.
Hello?
I hear
Hold
you.
on. You can hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. This is Q.
Hey, Q. What's up?
And I was calling about the Democratic sit-in stuff, and what I think it is, after all the coverage and everything by now, is that for them, it was an ends justify the means sort of thing, and what they did was they had this entire PR campaign ready to go, and they kicked it into gear immediately, sometime after, or you know, a little bit after Murphy started his filibuster stuff, and they just played it up. They played it up for fundraising. I think it was a power play, so that is to come back and try and do gun control reform. They think they'll have a better edge on the Republicans, and I think that, you know, it was just a political play, and they were trying to get the bully pulpit behind them. But ultimately, they did it at the cost of gambling on Islamophobia and, you know, just this, erasing homophobia and all these different intersections that the Orlando shooting occurred on. So it was, to me, it's kind of like, yeah, they, you know, gathered up all this energy, and if they can take it and hand it over to, in my opinion, their constituencies to try to do something comprehensive in order to address gun reform or gun legislation, or just helping communities in need or who suffer from gun violence every single day, then I think that would be great. But I think they really, my biggest issue with it is they really gambled on a bunch of racist shit.
Right, definitely. Like, that's just a great point. And I think it's Brandon is on Project Sanity, I believe, earlier today. I think Brandon had made the comment earlier when we were all talking about this, is that, you know, in the midst of all this and everyone's so outraged, and oh my God, this crime against, you know, the LGBT community, there was nothing actually passed in terms of LGBT protection. Like, there is nothing actually passed that would help keep people safe in a variety of situations where members of the LGBT community are actually targeted, right? Like, this literally got pushed forward. And there's a history of certain Democrats pushing, you know, for this terror loophole as closure or whatever it is as well. You know, they think they can be on the same, you know, at least we can get the one of you, I can't remember which one of you shared with me the ACLU letter that was written 2 days yesterday, either the 21st or 22nd, basically asking them not to vote on, you know, any of these amendments, because they're a problem. But definitely appreciate you calling in. Q is one of our other fantastic researchers who calls in. If anybody was calling, chat, we got a few more minutes. 857-600-0518. Yeah, it's just a lot of stuff today. But this good central stuff, like you could go, Liz, look at Liz Brown's Twitter timeline. Seriously, Liz unpacks, and she has unpacked it all beautifully. And the fact that the judge, this was, he's definitely making it challenging, very challenging for Prosecutor Mosby to make a case, and not because she doesn't actually have good facts. You could argue about whether or not she's met her burden of proof in certain instances, but how he oversimplifies and rationalizes things is very interesting when you actually read through the language used. To call this simple carelessness, and this is not just simple carelessness. Simple carelessness is like forgetting to put your dog on a leash, right? Like tie your dog up in the backyard or something like that, and they accidentally get out. That's like simple carelessness. Simple carelessness is like not pulling your garbage can off the curb or something like that. That's being simply careless. Simple carelessness does not result in people being, incapacitated in any way and ultimately dying. Like that's more than simple carelessness. So we really do need to challenge the way facts and legal standards are applied in terms of police officers. Because again, if I put someone in my car and they weren't buckled in properly and I drove them around and stuff like that, I could be charged for negligence. I could be held criminally liable. You could be held criminally not liable. Police should not get special treatment when they do things acting outside, what is necessary to do their job. And we can argue about what isn't necessary, but in a lot of these cases we see over-exaggerated, activity, behavior that's outside the confines of the position. There was a case, I think a week or so ago, where a cop just threw out an undercover cop. Well, no, he was off duty, plainclothes off duty cop pulled out his gun on somebody else because he was upset. It was like a traffic situation. The EU referendum, like the results are coming in from the EU, and it just flipped the other way. It's now 49.7% remain, 50.3% leave. They have 268 of 382 authorities still to declare. So it just flipped the other way. It's so close. This is like watching Missouri returns come back in, right? Like he's flipping back and forth one way or the other. So, will it be a leave or remain vote? We'll wait to see. We'll definitely keep tweeting it out because I'm about to wrap it up for the evening. I do appreciate those of you. I know y'all come to see Ben. I know I'm not Ben. I know we have very different energy and different styles, but I do appreciate those of you who do turn in. For everyone who hung around after the brilliant, of the brothers from Project Sanity. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. But we just try to bring you guys good content as much as possible. Tomorrow, I believe Ben has some pre-taped stuff. I think there's going to be a special Friday edition of the Benjamin Dixon Show. So that should be pretty cool to watch and check out. And then definitely remember to come back and hang out with us next week. Starting with Monday. Ben will be back on Monday. You have me on it on Tuesdays, and you have the Louisa Project new episodes come up on the channel on Wednesdays, and then you have Project Sanity on Thursday 79, and then the Benjamin Dixon Show again at 9 p.m. So we have content, across the board. Check it out. Definitely thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, a lot happened today. Go check out the Liz Unpacks. Like seriously, there is so much happened. And so much will continue to happen. But seriously, like when we look at what is going on with the Freddy Gray line of cases, we really need to keep in mind, kind of what is at stake, what is being looked at. They did have a major victory. The prosecutors did have a major victory when the appeals court did rule that I believe it's Officer Porter could be compelled to testify, and even though he hasn't had his own trial yet in the other trials. So, some of Judge Williams's decisions came upon what the defendant and other officers thought was okay. And again, that's just too subjective because they're all trying to cover themselves and save each other, right? we're not getting at justice or the truth that way if we're letting people, because it doesn't work this way. When you have co-defendants in a regular trial, ain't no judge, nobody is giving them extra leeway and consideration and understanding in terms of trying to ascertain the truth. Like, seriously, even though there's a presumption of innocence and proven guilty, like, this is so, the way this is happening is just so, there's just a double standard in the system, and cops are definitely treated differently. Again, if anyone, you or your loved ones, I have friends and family who are cop members. Well, yeah, I have friends and family who are cop members, not cop members, but cops as well. And my uncle was a school resource officer, and has friends in law enforcement, and he's just like, they need to throw the damn book at them. Like, what the hell? I mean, when you do bad things, the standard should be, if you do what you're not supposed to be doing, then you sully the uniform. But it seems to be the complete opposite, and we need to put a thing into that. We need to rectify the situation and move things forward. So I'm closing out for tonight. I greatly appreciate everyone for tuning in, who has tuned in, and thank you for coming and joining us here at the Progressive Army Benjamin Dixon Show. I am Anoa Tues, and I'm going to leave you with a parting quote. We must always refill and ensure there is a critical mass of leaders and activists committed to nonviolence and racial and economic justice who will keep seeding and building transforming movements. I think that is just so on point for everything that we're going through and experiencing right now. That was Marion Wright Edelman. We are moving forward. I mean, I know I say it every week, but we really are. Things are moving along. Things are building up. And with you, we will win. We will accomplish. So let's they want to do something. The Dems want to sit in and they're going to make change and they're going to stick to the Republicans. Let's take them up on that challenge. I mean, they put it out there. So they said they're going to do it. So let's demand it of them, right? I mean, whether you vote for them or not, I mean, they represent you. They still represent. They still out there claiming they make decisions. Write an op-ed, put it in your public paper, and call people out. Let's make them be accountable to us. Case closed. So I'm out. See you guys next week. Thank you.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.